Welcome to the Leaderish podcast with your hosts, Regina and Doris. Hey, Doris. How's it going?
Hey, Regina. It's going very well. How about you?
I'm doing great. And the reason I'm doing great is because my friend Lauren Kiproff-Downer is back for her third episode with us. What are we talking to Lauren about today?
Well, we're talking about caregiving, especially in that older generation or as caregivers in the workplace. And I'm going to read this quote. So millions of working professionals are also caregivers, whether for aging parents, partners with chronic illness, children with special needs, or others. It's a part of our identity now. And where some of us are in that sandwich generation where we're taking care of an older person and we may be taking care of children as well. So supporting caregivers isn't just a compassionate choice, it's a business imperative. And it's really important to understand, and what we're going to talk about today is retention, productivity, mental health, engagement are all such important topics to talk about in the workplace. And yes, we are very excited to have Lauren back with us today. The last time we touched on culture and climate, and today we're talking about more of that supportive environment. And so, Lauren, why don't you introduce yourself? Let us know a little bit more about you and what you do, and then we'll get the conversation going.
Fantastic. So glad to be back with you, Regina and Doris, today to share about a topic that's very near and dear to my heart. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Lauren Kiproff-Downer. I'm an organizational psychologist, master's level, and organizational development consultant running Perpara Organizational Development Consulting, a firm focused on forward thinking and driving the employee engagement experience always forward. One of the big areas of focus that I have right now is on helping organizations to address this growing need of meeting your caretaker employees where they are so that we can create the kind of work environment that will help to take care of the needs that they have and be able to allow them to continue thriving during what can be a very challenging personal and professional time for them in terms of balance. So really happy to share a little bit and just excited to answer any questions that you have.
Lauren, why has this become such a big topic? I mean, I get emails regularly from Korn Ferry or from wherever on this exact topic, caregiving. Why has this become such a buzzword recently?
Well, it's interesting you ask that, Regina. We are currently conservatively in a situation where, on average, 1 in 5 U.S. workers is having to do some sort of unpaid caregiving for either a child or an ailing parent or another loved one. And those are just the things that are clearly out there. There are also circumstances where, caregiving may extend to slightly less traditional relationships, maybe an ailing friend or a member of a church family or another member of your community some kind of way. And that's in addition to what would be more conventionally recognized caregiving situations. So all of that is compounding. And that is being coupled by the fact that the baby boomers are marching ever closer to retirement. And once that ends up taking place, there will be just this crush of caregiver responsibility on the sandwich generation that Doris was just mentioning in the introduction. And so with all of that, there's this priority on trying to understand before it gets to the point of being insurmountable, where we can meet them where we are or where they are, where the trouble spots might be and what we can really do as organizations and leaders to be giving them the kind of care and support that they need so that they can keep going. Because in a lot of situations, it's just a matter of them being able to endure and stay in the roles that they're in and being able to continue feeling valued and seen can be a huge part of it. So there's a lot more attention in the media, and we're grateful for that because this had kind of been a very unseen and underrepresented issue previously.
Lauren, I know that we're talking about this today because not every workplace is doing it perfectly well. Do you have some examples of organizations, without naming names, organizations that are doing it really well and organizations that aren't doing it as well, and some advice that you could give to those organizations to do things a little bit differently to support their workers that are taking care of parents and children and everyone in between.
Oh, absolutely. So when it comes to the organizations that are getting it right, and we'll keep it fair that even those that are knocking it out of the park, there's always room to be better and innovate in this area. But the people so far that are ahead of the curve are the ones that are creating consistent opportunities for work flex arrangements, are creating greater opportunity for skill development that allows for transference of work arrangements so that in circumstances where maybe the life needs of a particular employee that maybe had been in the office but suddenly is having a more in-depth need to be working remotely can transition the nature of their work. Also, companies that have regular access to employee resource groups that are focused around the consistent just support and acknowledgement of these challenges are doing a lot to help create experiences of engagement and increasing the opportunity for retention for the employees that are going through all of this. Now, for the ones that aren't, there is an unfortunate tendency for people to, or for certain organizations to look at this as a personal life problem, as something that the employee should be dealing with in their private life and their personal hours. And I would recommend, if I were having a discussion with a leader with that perspective, or if anyone listening has previously been holding that view, to reconsider the nature of how you're thinking about it in terms of engagement and retention. There are a lot of things, obviously, that people need to do in their personal life to figure out what they're doing and how they can manage the life circumstances that they're in, but creating a more open pathway for them to be able to do that effectively can really do a lot to empower somebody and just kind of give them the strength and focus that they need to be able to deal with those issues without them taking away from their ability to do their assigned job functions. So if your employee comes to you and says, I've got these challenges, meet them with compassion. Listen to what they're telling you. Don't automatically think about this as an excuse somebody is making, but instead look at it as an opportunity where you can come alongside them. And to the extent that it is open based on the nature of the working relationship, do what you can to be an ally in that issue and in that area for support and need. Because if you don't, there will be a competitor of yours that will be making strategic plans to make their work environment more hospitable for that, and they will be looking to capitalize on that advantage if you don't.
So I heard a few things. I heard kind of two ways to look at this. One is from an organizational perspective. And what I heard was three things that organizations can do. The first one is cross training. So you have someone who can pick up your slack when you need to be out unexpectedly. The second one, and these are in no particular order, is employee resource groups to help support caregivers. And then the third one was flexible work. And those were really around like organizationally, these are policies that an organization can enact. This is a organizational culture that can be created with those three things to help caregivers. But I also heard from a leader side, even if your organization doesn't have these things, they don't have these policies, then there are a few things as a leader that you can do. The first one is have compassion and empathy. And then the second one is work with them to the best of your ability to find a flexible arrangement based on the policies of the organization. A lot of organizations right now are going to unlimited PTO. And so helping that person, or even within your team, helping them cross-train someone that can fill in for them from time to time. You can do that as a leader of people without these big organizational processes in place.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And empowering yourself as a leader to take that step in compassion with your team can be a great first step in being able to meet the individual people that you are having report to you where they are when they have these issues. And the other great thing about it is if you're in a work environment where there's been more resistance around that kind of change more broadly, being able to make the case and show how that more compassionate employee forward approach towards responding to that situation helps to keep them engaged and keep them plugged in can do a lot then that you can take to other members of your organization, bigger leadership structures and whatnot, to be able to show in other situations, somebody like this might have left, but we
Yeah.
did what we needed to do to work with them and they're still here and they recognize that we appreciate them. And that right there in those moments where it's most vulnerable for that employee, that is going to be worth its weight in gold when it comes to creating that organizational citizenship behavior that keep people plugged in and keep people wanting to maintain their seat at the table at your company.
I will share an example of a company that had a procedure or a process in place that wasn't as flexible, but then something happened that impacted an employee and they quickly changed direction. So sometimes you have a small company that maybe will start or create a process. Let's say you just have 10 employees, so you create a process, you put together a procedure manual, and you think this makes sense at the time. A year, 2, 5, 10 years later, you realize that process doesn't make sense anymore. And having that flexibility to now go in and say, oh, this process doesn't make sense. Giving somebody one day to take care of something or someone doesn't make sense. So let's change that process around and we'll actually change the process in the manual. And I think I've seen that happen in a company that I worked for. And I was very appreciative and respectful of that company that they changed on the fly and they realized that this process, this procedure doesn't make sense. So we're going to change it and we're going to change it for everyone going forward. And I think that's I would applaud companies that are willing and able to do that.
Absolutely. Now, the beautiful thing about a small company or a mid-sized company is they have more capacity to do that kind of change more quickly. But even in a situation where it's a bigger organization, a change can start from a small, step or a small process. So even if it is looking at the way a particular department or team is engaging in some of those decisions and trying to take care of those needs where they can, where it's feasible and realistic, it's a great thing to explore if you're a leader that might be running into some of those challenges with your team. So definitely agree and can't advocate strongly enough for the importance of making that step because the people that are going through these situations aren't doing it for their fun. It's not a matter of people not wanting to put in their time and effort to work. They are pouring
Yeah.
themselves out, trying to just keep their day-to-day life going. And the burnout risk is profound when it comes to somebody in that kind of work struggle anyway. So being able to show that you see them and that the struggles that they're going through while you're not going to dive into their personal life and nobody's asking you to, but what you can do to help to get the barriers out of the way for them will mean an awful lot to keeping them productive and plugged in.
So the one thing that I didn't hear is intermittent FMLA. I mean, there are protections for caregivers um, based on just government policy, right? But I didn't hear you bring that up.
Intermittent FMLA is a great thing, but it's not an all-encompassing answer to this problem. In certain circumstances, it can be a lifeline, but in certain circumstances, it's putting a Band-Aid on a deeper wound. And so it's important to think about FMLA or intermittent FMLA as a foundation, as a place to start, but it might not be enough to address everything that the employee might be going through. even down to with some of the mental health burden that can come from dealing with these challenges. Making sure that if your organization has an employee assistance program, for instance, that your employees that are going through these challenges are aware that they have access to that and that they keep that available regardless of the circumstances that they may be experiencing to help them deal with the stress and pressure of all of that. Creating other opportunity for them to be able to get other resources and support when it comes to all of these things, or just having the conversations about these struggles being valid. Because a lot of times it's oh, hey, it's not really that big of a problem. Oh, just toughen up. You can deal with it. That's not the attitude that somebody that you value and respect in your workplace should ever be met with when they're just trying to continue being productive for you and trying to meet those other responsibility needs.
Yeah, that seems like that would stink if I had a leader that I needed to take maybe my parent or my child to the doctor and they're like, you need to do that after work hours. I can't imagine that. But also psychologically, that's what I think. Oh, work hours is for work. I can't do outside things during work hours. That is how I am just wired, I guess, right? And I think a lot of folks are, and they're scared to take that time, or they are scared to ask. They don't have the psychological safety or the trust of the organization to feel comfortable saying, I need to take a person in my life, I'll just leave it that general, to the doctor, or I need to care for a person in my life, and I need to do that for a few days. Can I have some flexible arrangements?
Well, and that's a great point. And being able to keep everything more open would be helpful. Now, there are a lot of companies that would push back and say, well, we have to stay in the parameters of that which is legally required and that which is approved. And depending on the nature of the job, it's understandable in certain circumstances, but we don't have to live and breathe just by what is put forward as a requirement. There may be opportunities to be more flexible and more compassionate, and where they lay, consider them. It doesn't mean go let people just go do whatever they want to. We're not advocating for anything like that, but in situations where those pressures are really going on, it is important to default on trusting that the employee is not trying to pull a fast one on you, that they are genuinely going through these challenges, and that meeting them where they are will be a critical piece in keeping the trust and perceptions of safety and engagement nice and strong in the dynamic that you're building in your team or in your department.
Yeah, you mentioned FMLA is a great place to start. If we were to try to challenge our listeners to really review their processes and procedures, do you have a 3-step, 4-step, 5-step action plan that organizations can take today to review and model better behavior or model better practices? What are some things that people can do today to really start moving in the right direction if they're not already doing it?
Well, one thing that I would recommend would be to just start with an audit of that particular policy section in your handbook. Look and see when it was last updated. If it hasn't been touched since before the COVID era, that's probably a good clue that you might need to start kind of dusting it off a little bit, because the nature of work in the world has shifted so much in that time. So that would be one thing to kind of look into, and look into the nature of the work arrangements and responsibilities of the employees that are reporting to you. See where there may be opportunity to extend more flexibility to them, depending on obviously what they're doing. And I recognize we've got all of this return to office debate going on right now that will continue to be a discussion that we are facing. But in all of that, let critical thinking guide you. if somebody is in a circumstance where they're genuinely dealing with work-life conflict challenges coming from either caregiving or non-traditional caregiving, it's a reasonable thing to look at whether or not you maybe make some special exceptions for them based on the nature of what they're going through. And that has to be okay. And even just looking at your own responses, if somebody sends you an email, hey, I need to take my mom to an appointment during my work day, how are you instinctively reacting to that? Is it automatically going into a, no, you don't? That's not for the work day, that's for whatever, without thinking about, well, what can we do to work with them and meet them there? Like if it's just kind of that baked in instinct, maybe start to think a little bit more about working on your responses. Don't automatically just jump into, well, this is the way it's always been, so this is the way it has to be. Things are changing, as we've been talking about, and this is only the beginning. It's going to get worse before it gets better when it comes to the number of people that are engaged in caregiving circumstances or the pressures that they're facing. So if you start to work on the way that you're thinking about it now, it'll make you a stronger leader, and it'll make you a more engaging leader as the shifts in the work environment and in our workforce continue to rise.
There's 2 points that I want to make. The first one is I'd like to add to that is that we should be looking at our employees as people who get work done. If they're still getting the work done, it doesn't matter that they're leaving in the middle of the day to take a family member to the doctor or go check on someone and maybe take them lunch or whatever ever that looks like. We should be assessing our employees based on their goals and the outcomes based on those goals.
Absolutely.
Instead of the amount of time that they're spending in the office. So that's kind of the first point that I wanted to make. And then I have a follow-up question for you. You said that one of the first places to start was to audit your policy. And I'm curious, Lauren, what would you recommend organizations look for that may need changes? What are some of the common things that you're seeing in policy that probably needs to be changed?
Limiting the number of hours of PTO that somebody can have is one place to look. Making sure that you are considering the nature of the requirements of work arrangements. So if something has been written exclusively for an in the office 5 days a week with no exceptions sort of thing, maybe that might be a little bit too rigid. Consider potentially being able to share PTO. There have been some work arrangements where a particular team may be donating PTO hours. Is that practical compared to giving unlimited PTO as long as the work is still getting done? Things like that to be looking at. And looking to see if there are other support systems that you could potentially build into the nature of the benefits that you're offering. All things to be looking at, and important things to consider that weren't necessarily as much of a challenge years ago.
I want to play devil's advocate for just a second. Playing the role of the leader, and maybe there is a trust issue with an employee, or you think there's an employee that is trying to take advantage of the system, and maybe Aunt Susie has died 5 times. And
Doris.
What are some ways to help maybe build that trust, or to at least try to discover, is there an employee that's trying to take advantage? So I know we're talking about all these great things that we want to do to support our employees. Obviously, we all want to do that, or we should want to do that. But we also know that there may be employees that take advantage of situations or new policies and procedures and take off too much time. What are ways to maybe build that trust, or to try to find out if trust has been mishandled by an employee?
I mean, that's definitely a fair thing and a legitimate challenge that you run into. I would definitely start by looking at the nature of how the employees are getting the work done and if they're consistently kicking the can down the road on certain projects. Even that might not be what you think it is when it comes to somebody dealing with a caregiver situation, because sometimes the challenge in meeting a particular deadline might have more to do with the fact that they're having to be up working until the wee hours of the night, or they're not getting any sleep because they're having to take care of the baby and their mom in the hospital and whatever else. So if they're running into challenges, instead of coming in hot on your one-on-one and lighting them up about why they're not getting certain things done, talk to them about what burdens are you running into? What can I do to help? And what can I do to support you? And looking at it in an eye of, giving them the benefit of the doubt. Now, there's only so far that that takes you. And if somebody is genuinely trying to just get out of things, you put forward good support and it's still not getting done, then you may have to be having a conversation with them about, is this the right seat for you? Is there another job here that might better work with what you're trying to do, what your availability and bandwidth currently are, so that you're not coming in acting like you're pointing any fingers at anyone, but it's more a matter of, is this too heavy for you right now? Could we potentially give you some kind of flexibility when it comes to the nature of what your work is until or maybe you need to be moving to a different number of hours or some other kind of different arrangement. But making sure that you're not automatically, oh, okay, so there's an issue here, so I'm going to assume that they're all just trying not to do their work. I think a lot of times people are more wary to be open about the struggles that they're having because it's going to make them look like they're not dedicated. And I'd venture to guess in a lot of situations that's not the case, but having that openness there also lends itself to the legitimacy of the leader having to take action if you've done what you can to be compassionate and they're just kind of a dead fish or a dead leaf hanging on the branch. Then at that point, it's a different conversation, but you've created a fair and safe space for them to do what they needed to do with the full understanding that you were trying to do everything you can to be their supporter and their advocate.
So I've had both. I've had employees who worked directly for me that needed some extra support for caregiving, and with much success, we were able to give them that time that they needed when they needed it. They came back engaged, thankful for having that time, and actually probably, I would say, did better work when they came back because we allowed them to take the space and time that they needed to do what they needed to do to caregive. Now, on the flip side, I have also had employees, Doris, to your exact point, who tried to pull the wool over my eyes. And yes, Aunt Sally had already died. Like, why are we having another funeral? Like several funerals in a certain period of time or whatever. Or a recurring illness with a family member that would just abruptly take the person out of work, whatever, and then the communication stopped. And that's when I think you start to really know that something's not right, or the story gets bigger and bigger and bigger. And so that's when your intuition kind of sparks and the hairs on the back of your neck go up and you're like, wait, something's not right here. Now, I have had to let employees go because they abused the policies. But also, I have seen employees become more dedicated and more engaged because they used the policies correctly. And by the way, it wasn't necessarily the policy. It was me as the leader affording them the leeway, making sure that as these issues came up, there was people cross-trained. To Lauren's exact example, there were folks that could jump in and help out in the time of need. Nothing got dropped. And then there were also the ERG support that Lauren talked about at the corporate level, but I had care and compassion. Sometimes, though, that care and compassion that you have as a leader can actually be taken advantage of. So you just have to use your intuition. And I think that's kind of where you were getting at, Doris. Like, when am I being
Yes.
taken advantage of as a leader or as an organization? And I think we have to look for that, but we have to do it in still a compassionate way.
Yes.
We're not going out for a witch hunt here, right? But we're
Exactly.
just monitoring the situation and trying to read our own intuition on when things don't seem right.
Absolutely.
And reinforcing an awareness that part of the beauty of that trust and grace that we're giving somebody in those circumstances also comes with a deep innate accountability that they need to be acting honorably in order to, show their appreciation for the space that is being made for them to address those needs. You're not always guaranteed that your leader is going to care enough to try to meet you where you are. So if they are, don't act like a jerk about it. Don't sit there and try to see what you can get away with. Be straightforward. Show accountability for the behavior that you're doing. Be able to talk about what you're doing with the time if it's being asked of you. Not that you need to get into nitty-gritty details of your personal life, but just be able to conduct yourself honorably and with that accountability. Because no leader who is trying to do right by their people should be left in those moments of having to make that hard call, because it's a lack of respect for the support that the leader is trying to give in that moment. And that is a disservice to anyone who has ever had to be making those difficult choices when it comes to trying to navigate that caregiver role while also trying to stay plugged into the work that they're doing.
Yeah, so I think, Lauren, what I heard as a caregiver, you need to ask for what you need and be appreciative. It's not hugs and thank yous and all that, big thank yous, cards and flowers, but just thanks, this is really going to help
Yeah.
me. But also, as an employee asking for additional time to caregive, you do still have a responsibility to the organization, and you need to get your stuff done, and you need to be able to tell your leader what you're doing and when you're doing it and how you're getting
Exactly.
it done and where you are as far as status goes. That's what I'm hearing.
Precisely.
Mm.
And being aware of that more as kind of a two-way social contract within your work environment is a really good way of thinking about the nature of that relationship between the caregiver and their leader and the organization. Everybody should be working together for the benefit of everyone involved. The employee should
Yeah.
be doing what they can do to try to keep the wheels turning to the best of their ability, and be honest about it when you've got your plate too full. That is another thing. There's so much pressure on caregivers a lot of times to try to convince themselves that they're okay. I can keep this moving. I can keep this going. It's fine, because they're afraid if they show any kind of vulnerability, it's going to be oh, okay, I'm going to get booted out the door. Well, no, they need to be able to say safely, I'm drowning right now. It's too much for me.
Yeah.
But if you're going to welcome that, then it also needs to be you need to do your part to
I
support your team and your leaders.
absolutely. I really like that, the two-way contract, two-way social contract. I think that's a great phraseology. And I want to ask you, are there any questions we didn't ask you today that you wish we would have? Any questions that you want to answer that we didn't ask?
One thing that I want to get people thinking about and really leave you with is the understanding that caregiver is not a one-size-fits-all blank box. There is the traditional caregiver sort of dynamic that we've talked about. There are also non-traditional caregivers. It can be circumstances where maybe you're helping with somebody who isn't in one of the written in black and white relationships that we have designated in our policies. Sometimes it's also a family member or a child caring for someone living several hours away and having to deal with all of the schedule management and circumstances. Sometimes it could be other circumstances that might not be as obvious. And all of those things can potentially necessitate need for support, but it might be a more difficult thing for somebody to be aware of because it hasn't been part of the lived experience of the leader. And so it just might be an easy thing for it to slip by them. So thinking about caretaking and being a caretaker as a little bit more amorphous than what the traditional mom with baby standard is that we've been socialized in can be really important. I guess the other thing wouldn't necessarily be a question, but it's more of a challenge and a reminder to people that are currently going through caregiver circumstances, whether you're a leader or an employee, that you are doing a great job, that the struggles that you're going through are valid, and that there are people that care and understand and are trying to make more awareness of the struggles that you're in. And I think it's really cool that we're delving into that here on Leaderish as well, so that we can raise more awareness for what those issues and struggles can be. So definitely a beautiful thing to be sharing today.
Awesome. Regina, as we wrap up today, any final thoughts on what you might want to share that hasn't been shared?
Well, I think there were a few things for me, I think, that came out of today's, which I think is what I want to share, is that there are things that the organization can do, but there's also things that you as a leader can do. But also there's things as an employee that you have to do. Like, this is a triangle. This is a triangle and everyone has a role. So play your role, play it well, and try to help each other. Be kind is, I think, what I've heard. Be kind as an organization, be kind as a leader, be kind as an employee who is in a caregiving situation.
Yeah, I would, and to add to that, just be flexible. I know we use the word flexible a number of times today, and I think that's really important as we're doing those audits of our policies and procedures, to be flexible and realize change needs to happen. We can't remain stagnant and say the processes that we created 10, 15 years ago are still applicable today, that we need to be willing to change and be flexible with the circumstances that we are surrounded with today.
Yeah. Well, what a great episode. Lauren, thank you so much for being here with us today. What a great conversation. We've been talking about it for months to have this conversation on the podcast. So I'm glad that we are finally here doing that. And if you'd like to reach out to Lauren, you can find her information in the show notes. We'll have her website, her email address, all that good stuff, so you can reach out directly to Lauren. Of course, Doris and I love to hear from you. So if you would like to reach out to either of us, please do so via email. You can hit us up on our websites, LinkedIn, the socials, all that good stuff. And we'd love a review. If you found this episode interesting, if you have a friend who is caregiving, we're asking you to share this episode with your friend who is in the midst of caregiving and trying to work. If you have a friend who's a leader and who's like, oh, I'm so frustrated, Sally's out all the time, then send this episode to that leader. If you have a friend who runs an organization and you're concerned that maybe their caregiving policies aren't where they need to be, send this episode. We're asking you to send this episode. Share it with somebody. Give us a 5-star review. Leave a comment. We are forever grateful for every comment and every review that we get. And if you're interested in being on the podcast, reach out to us. We'll schedule some time and chat with you to see if your topic would be a good fit for us. And I guess, ladies, on that note, I'll end us with cheers.